Wednesday was a very hard day for many of us in this congregation. The rest of the week wasn't much better, for me at least, as I've gotten more details on the gains Trump made in this election. His supporters knew who he was voting for, who they were voting for this time. There is no doubt about who Donald J. Trump was and is. And the majority said, this is who we want to lead our country. If we believe in democracy, as Harris said in her speech, we have to accept the results. Bitter though they may be for many of us. Let me also say, putting some words together for you this morning has not been so easy either. I have had a deep feeling of disconnection with an electorate who is willing to put a convicted felon, an insurrectionist, and a sex offender back in the highest office in this nation. They are willing to ignore the rule of law for someone they wish to be their president. A man who believes that he, and he alone, has all the solutions to the country's ills. A man who has promised to use the Justice Department to persecute his enemies. My reaction to this election result suggests that I am a little out of touch with the majority of voters in this country. I don't want to believe my neighbors voted for him. I've been consuming a lot of election analysis to try to tell me why, but there is still a disconnect. I'm realizing I'm in a bit of a blue bubble, given where I live, the media that I consume, and the people that I spend time with. Much as I would like to believe that I'm getting well-rounded media exposure, I'm sensing my choices have insulated me enough that I could be so surprised by the election outcome. I imagine that might be the case for other people here this morning too. So I'd like to step a little bit out of my blue bubble a bit and see if I can begin to get a sense of why Trump was re-elected president. One key factor that I haven't fully appreciated is the size of the cult of personality that Trump has been curating for the last 10 years. What are the qualities of this cult, you ask? Trump is a charismatic leader who is worshiped by his followers. He is the single defining element now of the Republican Party and its only source of truth, power, and authority. Trump has systematically created an alternate reality where truth is defined by what he says. His supporters often uncritically repeat demonstrably false statements made by Trump. There is no legitimate opposition to Trump within the Republican Party. Any challenge to his conduct or claims becomes a hostile attack on the whole group. Trump has reveled in the fundamentalist Christian anointing of him as God's chosen messenger and agent in this fallen world. This was dramatically magnified by the near miss of that assassin's bullet that nicked his ear and may have swung the election for him. Trump is a different kind of politician than we've ever seen before. His appeal has little to do with his policies and ideology. He satisfies the psychological need of followers who seek strong leadership, a quality more familiar to cult leaders than political figures. Steve Hassan spent several years in the Unification Church as a young adult and escaped. He has dedicated the last 40 years of his life to exposing cults and their leaders. In a book I recommend to you titled The Cult of Trump, he explains how cult leaders use sophisticated mind control methods to seduce their members to believe they have freely chosen to follow the leader. Back in 2015, Hassan recognized Trump was using many of the same techniques that Sun Myung Moon did leading the Unification Church. Trump's absolute air of authority, air of confidence, his grandiosity, his practice of sowing fear and confusion, his demand for absolute loyalty, his tendency to lie and create alternate facts and realities, his shunning and belittling of his critics and ex-believers, his attack on any media that didn't praise or worship him, thus cutting off his believers from alternate sources of information about him. These techniques are all common to cult leaders like L. Ron Hubbard, David Koresh, and Jim Jones. Hassan points out one of the most effective cult techniques is to make the followers feel special and part of an inside group in the know, as opposed to the unenlightened, unbelieving, dangerous outsiders. Cult leaders need the strong inner us versus the bad outer them to hold their followers close and insulate them from outer influence. One could see how Trump created that dynamic when he lost in 2020 and claimed the election was stolen. His followers trusted his judgment rather than the predominance of evidence to the contrary from the outsiders. What most of us don't recognize is how effective a master manipulator like Trump can be to get inside people's heads, charm their emotional limbic system, and make them believe they are making a rational choice to follow the leader no matter what they say. More than anything else, this is the base of Trump's power. This is the base he has been building since he ran in 2016, his loyal MAGA followers. These are the followers who show up and vote en masse in primary challenges to Republicans who do not and will not be Trump's sycophants. The MAGA true believers have helped Trump clear the Republican Party of any opposition, purifying the in-group. The blue bubble that I am part of are Biden true believers. Trump's out-group. A fellow Delawarean, I have been his supporter since 1972, when I campaigned for him as a teenager, passing out literature at people's doors. Biden is a compassionate man who cares about people and has worked to make their lives better. He cares even for those who oppose him in those small rural communities that voted overwhelmingly against him. Biden has been a world statesman for many years, seeking to keep a world order that puts justice, human rights, and prosperity for all at the center. Not that he was successful, unfortunately, when it came to Palestinians and Afghan women, but we don't know what he tried to do behind the scenes in the secret world of diplomacy. And that failure lost the Democrats a big block of voters, especially Muslim voters, this year. And he helped prevent a recession during the pandemic that sadly was his undoing. The generosity to help people during the lockdown and in the early recovery had the unintended consequence of stimulating inflation. That is what people remembered, not all the help that they got to survive hard times. Democrats were so enthralled with the good that Biden was doing that they lost touch with how his support eroded. Although Kamala and Tim ran a valiant campaign, they remained too tied to the current administration. Administrations around the world that are governed through the pandemic have also been hammered. And of course, it would have been wise for Biden to decide not to run a year ago and allow a new champion to emerge, not tied to the administration. What is so disheartening is to see in this election is traditionally Democrat voting blocs moving toward Trump across the board. The idea that groups will vote with you because of their identity crashed in this election. Hispanics especially, but blacks too, moved toward Trump even with the racist anti-Puerto Rican jokes in Madison Square Gardens. In the final days and weeks of the campaign, even with Trump completely off the rails of his stump speech, that made no difference. If people had to hold their nose, they voted for him anyway. We are witnessing a grand political realignment, and Trump is at the center. This will be a time of deep soul searching for the leaders of Unitarian Universalism, my fellow members of the UUA board. We are meeting on Monday, and we'll be thinking about all this because they are in every way anti-Trump. I think this is why, as an institutional leader, as a minister, and as a board member of the UUA, I am feeling this so profoundly. I am at the center of that blue bubble that seems to be out of step with the times. Or are we? Or are we? The exit polling suggests that a good portion of the gains Trump got in this election have to do with the economy and the border. They were not necessarily votes of confidence that Trump could handle the problems as much as they were convinced that the Biden administration couldn't or wouldn't. And they didn't differentiate Harris from Biden, the drum Trump beat at every possible opportunity, because that's who he wanted to run against anyway. I don't know why voters thought Trump a buddy of Netanyahu would be any different for the Palestinians than Biden, maybe worse. I canvass my neighborhood in East Greenbush up north for signatures to get Democrats and Democratic candidates on the ballot. And I spoke with one such voter from Pakistan who filled my ear with his anger against Biden last spring. I suspect those Muslim voters were very angry at Biden and wanted to send a message the Democrats could hear. What was most helpful to me on Wednesday was Jon Stewart's indecision segment on election night. He played clips of pundits making grand predictions in the moments after the votes had been counted. They were all wrong 4 years later. Who could have predicted after January 6th, after a second impeachment, that Trump could get another term? Unthinkable 4 years ago. The opposite of Biden, Trump likes being king much more than he likes to govern. He wants results, but is quite uninterested in the act of running the government. Can he deliver on his promises? Can he keep his Republican coalition together if the margins are very close in the House, as the Democrats discovered with the even split that one disgruntled Democrat could dissuade the whole election process, the whole legislative process? Might Russia take the opportunity to invade Lithuania or Estonia, or maybe China will decide this is the moment to invade Taiwan? Will North Korea be emboldened to make a move on the South, given he's a buddy with Trump? And what about the growing pressures of climate change, which are only going to increase? There is a growing crisis in insuring property with all of these increasing natural disasters. And can Trump do anything about the housing crisis? Can he keep inflation in check if he wants to tell the Fed what to do? Will changes in healthcare cost him popularity? And will he go after Social Security and Medicare? The American people are fickle and will turn on him if he doesn't deliver the results they want, especially if he controls Congress and is no one to blame. Most voters are not indoctrinated the way the MAGA base is. 2026 will be the referendum I'd like to see before accepting the complete realignment in favor of Trump. Remember, voters rejected MAGA candidates in 2022. My deepest concern right now is the way Trump has activated the culture wars and put trans folks at great peril. Depending on what happens next, this may be a top priority for us to consider. We'll be focusing on this concern next Sunday with a previously planned Transgender Day of Remembrance service. We may need to shelter immigrants again who need to get to Canada, possibly, in a modern underground railroad to get the asylum that they need to save their lives. And this is what our congregation did in 2017, along with a number of other New York congregations. So this week, many of us will be grieving what we are about to lose that was good with the Biden administration. Our Unitarian Universalist values will be at risk for the next 4 years. I want you to know that your Unitarian Universalist Association and your UU ministers and many of our congregations will be fighting for those values. I deeply believe our values are core American values. Remember, almost 70 million people voted for Harris. Those of us who supported her are not alone. Those of us and let us remember Kamala's call to us that I believe can speak to both red and blue. Here are her words again. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is the fight I will never give up. Today, may we take and find courage in her words and be willing to join that fight. So be it.